Many of us out there have already filled out our absentee ballot applications for this November's election. And whether you're voting in person or absentee, your ballot's going to have a number of judicial elections on it this year. Might be a good time for us to get an overview of Michigan's court system. And for that, we turn to Tom Sinas from Sinas Dramus Law Firm. Hey, Tom.
Hey, Todd. How are you?
I'm well. Can you start? I mean, we've heard of circuit court, district court, court of appeals, Supreme Court. I mean, there's a lot going on just in the state. Can you provide us maybe an overview?
Yeah, it's like court soup. You hear all those names and you're not really sure what it all means. So I think the easiest way is to think of it from sort of the bottom up, if you will. And by the bottom, I mean, that is where people go when they have a lawsuit or a legal matter that they want to put into the legal system. And we call those courts, in shorthand, we call them trial courts. Now, these are the courts that most people would maybe be familiar with if they've been summoned for jury duty or if they have been involved in a case, whether it's civil or criminal. And at our trial court level, we have the two most common courts that people may be aware of are what are called district courts and circuit courts. And these are courts that are both trial courts, but they hear different matters depending upon the severity of the matter. So, for example, district courts hear civil cases that have amounts in controversy of less than $25,000 and criminal cases involving misdemeanor offenses in general. Circuit courts hear criminal cases involving felonies and civil cases where there's more than $25,000 in controversy. We also have our probate court system, very important here, part of this trial court level, but that's your kind of general trial court. From there, we have what's called the Michigan Court of Appeals. And that's the first place that people go if they want to appeal something that's been decided in a trial court. Generally in Michigan, people have a right of appeal, meaning they have a right to have their case heard by the Court of Appeals if they choose to do so. And the Court of Appeals judges sit in various parts of the state and they hear civil and criminal and all sorts of matters. And then at the very top of the appellate chain, the top of our court system is the Michigan Supreme Court. That is the highest court in the land, the one that has the final say over Michigan law. It, however, is a discretionary court, meaning it is somewhat like the U.S. Supreme Court. It only hears cases that it chooses to hear. So it reviews cases that have come up from the Court of Appeals and decides if it wants to hear those cases. And then if it does, of course, its decisions become the law of the land. So that, in quick fashion, that's a summary of our court system.
When it comes to judges, a lot of state judges will be on the ballot. They're voted for. Some judges are appointed, some are voted for. What's the difference? Why are state court judges on the ballot?
Great question. In Michigan, all judges eventually stand for some type of election or re-election. In other words, all judges are accountable to voters at some level. However, you do hear, as you mentioned, the governor appointing judges. How does that work? Well, generally speaking, if a judge retires or there's some other reason for a vacancy created during that judge's term, then the governor has the ability to appoint someone to that spot. So that's how you hear generally of people becoming appointed to a particular spot within a Michigan state court. Once they're appointed, however, they then ultimately will have to stand for re-election depending upon the election term of that particular court. So if, on the other hand, a judge were to retire and they were retiring at the end of their term with creating an open seat at the end of the term, then in that case, the voters would elect the replacement right away. But either way, the voters in Michigan, whether it's trial court judges or the Michigan Supreme Court, ultimately vote on all of our judges.
So the people have a say in who's going to be on that bench. Any suggestions for voters when it comes to judicial elections this year?
Yes, my biggest suggestion is prepare yourself. You're going to get a ballot. And of course, all of us are familiar with the ads we see on TV. But you're not going to see a lot of ads for judicial races. And notably, the judicial races on your ballot are not going to be in the partisan part of your ballot. So there's a part of the ballot, of course, that's partisan, and you can vote straight ticket one way or another. But that will not result in you voting in any of the judicial elections. And judicial elections matter. People may end up in front of a judge at one way or another, or judges end up deciding things that apply to everyone, perhaps. And so it's important for you to take a little extra time to familiarize yourself with what contested judicial elections you might find on your ballot, so that when you go in there, you have a sense of maybe what's the right vote for you without just feeling like you're kind of guessing at random.
And of course, the biggest bit of advice, make sure you get out there and vote. Thank you very much, Tom, for the information.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.